All right, and welcome back to the WeWealthWoman podcast. I am your host, Athena Gardner, CPA and founder of WeWealthWoman, where we teach women how to live their best wealthy lives. Okay, and I am excited today because we have a special guest, Mike Russell, in the house. Special guest. So I'm going to introduce Mike and give you a little background on him. So Mike Russell seemingly had it all: a successful family, real estate business, every afforded opportunity, a happy and healthy family. Then, unfortunately, his excessive lifestyle led to divorce, foreclosures, short sales, bankruptcies, and shame. It took a better part of a decade to fully turn it around. But those years in financial ruin felt like they would never end, and it just didn't take time to rebuild. It took a complete change in how he thought, right? The rebuilding didn't begin until the 7-year time frame since discharge from bankruptcy had passed. Filing bankruptcy felt like the only option at the time, but in hindsight and through the benefit of knowledge, there were so many other paths that could have remedied his issues. Once that very slow period became financeable again, he looked at relationships with bank from a much wiser position. As a result of filing bankruptcy, the full turnaround took about 9 years to take hold and something of a solid baseline, right?
Yeah.
Since that time, he has redefined his career in real estate, sales, investments, and consulting, and maintained a perfect credit rating. To pay it forward, he is helping people to avoid foreclosure, bankruptcy, and remain in their home, which is key for this time period, which is a trifecta of perfection. All right. With accountability, action, and effort, this trifecta is possible about 50% of the time. Mike is also the president and owner of Century 21 Signature Properties, one of the original Century 21 franchises in the country. About 40% of the time, selling the property proves to be the only way to avoid foreclosure. Mike also earned a BA from University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, and we are lucky to have him here today. Mike,
How are you? Glad to be here.
listen, such a journey. Such
Yeah.
a journey.
Yes. A long one. Yeah. Sure. I'm getting old.
But with age comes the wisdom. So,
Yeah,
Mike, your story is one of resilience and transformation.
it is.
Can you share what it was like to go from having it all to facing foreclosure, bankruptcy, and rebuilding your life from scratch?
How much time you got? No. Listen, it was painful. It was painful. And, listen, everybody's story is different, right? Everyone's story is somewhat unique. There's commonality in all struggle, I think. But mine was really born of entitlement. I took for granted the relative ease of life that I had for a very long time. And I was pretty naive to, macroeconomics, market cycles, the reality of, downturns and things like that. I was naive to it. I just thought the gravy train was going to keep running and really just improving. I never really took into consideration for one moment that things could go to hell in a handbasket in the economy. I really didn't. I was young, but I wasn't that young. I should have known better. So my issues were really born of just an innate entitlement, thinking that I was entitled to living a great life and having things with what felt like ease at the time. I didn't really have much respect for the dollar. I was really more in tune with immediate gratification. I wanted it. I wanted it now, and I didn't particularly care if I had to leverage anything in the present or the future to obtain it. And so, as you can imagine, humility from that point is a road, a long one. It doesn't happen overnight, and so I made a lot of bad decisions. I I was pretty naive to the things that I had said. I made, again, immediate gratification decisions. Like bankruptcy felt like, hey, whatever, so I don't have to pay. All right, yeah, sign me up for that. And not really thinking much about the 5 to 7 years
Mhm.
of, maybe in 3 years I got an offer for like a credit card with a $500 limit, and I was just kind of unbankable in the eyes of any kind of traditional lending environment. uh,
Mhm.
and it robbed me of 7 years of ability to grow financially. It really robbed me of that. And that those feelings of shame and less than and all of those things that um, were exacerbated by that, because my identity through all those entitlement years was really um, one and the same with money and how I was doing and how my company was doing and all of those things. There was no separation between Mike, the individual human being, and how well he was doing. Those things were very ingrained, wrongfully so, of course. And so not being bankable, not being able to make any moves or do anything really made me exacerbated those less than feelings and just kept me in a pretty bad place for a long time. Yeah.
Hmm. I appreciate you sharing that because I often feel like I want to discuss this further later in the episode. There's a lot of financial shame that happens and that is happening, and people mask that, or people aren't open about that. Um, but I want to also ask you, what was the turning point that made you realize it was time to change not just your financial habits, but your entire mindset?
Well, um, it was look, it was pretty drastic, the pain points that came, I had created an enormous amount of collateral damage in my circle of the people who mean the most to me and that I meant the most to. I created great collateral damage in my immediate family. I made my parents' life tremendously challenging. I got assets that they owned attached by other liens. My actions led up to a whole bunch of things, and I never that, as you can imagine, really 10x the guilt and the remorse and the shame, right? So a big part of my story and how I began to change my thinking, just who I am, is I got sober because I wasn't, and that was a big part of my story. And so that changed just about every one of my actions in life, just about every one. I spent many
Mhm.
years in my life thinking about myself first and no one else really any particular time after that, just myself second, third, fourth, and fifth too. And that's just not who I am today. And that it's been a long time on this new road, and I choose it 10 times out of 10. And so that's really what changed my actions, the way that I thought, the way that I considered my future, the way that I accepted the fact that I am not immortal and I'm not going to live forever, and that the future actually does matter, right? There were a lot of years in my life I didn't really think I'd be around very long anyway. And so
Mhm.
that's just a big part of my story, right? The life turnaround. And so I turned my life around. And that's why I started this work that I do. And the reason what keeps me engaged is I like to play a small role and be an inflection point, a positive one in people's lives, and help people turn their lives around. Because,
Mhm.
man, I'll tell you, if I can, absolutely anybody can. There's no question about that.
And I think also you going through that, it kind of sometimes we face these hardships and it's hard,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
oftentimes it is the foundation and building block to something greater or a greater purpose in life that we may not have found
Yes,
without it.
I
So
agree.
sometimes I feel like the hardships really kind of make you in that way.
Sure.
So, how did overcoming your own financial struggles inspire you to start Hope for Hardship and help others facing foreclosure?
Well, personally, like the story I was just telling my own, I made a fair bargain with the people who helped me turn my life around, and that is to help the next man or woman do the same,
Mhm.
without any expectation of anything in return. And so that was the base. That was the basis of the work I do. The rest of it is, I've been in the real estate business since I was 19 years old. I'm 47 now. I'm coming up on 30 years in this business. I have more useless knowledge about this in my brain that I
Mhm.
have no value to provide the world with, except for helping people understand their rights, the timelines, what's going to happen with a bank when they file a notice of intent to foreclose, what your options are, how to craft outstanding applications for assistance, like all of that stuff. And I take it for granted, to be honest with you, but boy, it's not a fair fight with a bank against the average consumer. It's just not a fair fight. And most people who are going through a foreclosure, and frankly all of them from what I've seen, if you are facing foreclosure in your life, you have um, a lot of other problems in your life too. And it can really, the foreclosure can feel like the smallest one, frankly, because when you're going through this, you have other serious personal issues going on, relational issues going on, health issues going on in your life. And so the idea of compartmentalizing and taking the time and effort with a clear mind to research what your options are and how you can protect, it's just an unreasonable ask. People aren't in a position in their mindset to be able to do that. And so I have that stuff freely. Like I said, it's just rattling around in my brain. And so it's tremendously simple for me. And I mean, why not take that useless information and do something good with it? So that's what I spend the vast majority of my time doing, really, is just kind of reaching back in the recesses of my mind as I deal with each individual situation. Um, I I believe that it's easy for me to resonate with people because you can't fake shared struggle. There are a lot of people in the world who try to step in when people get their property in threat of foreclosure, but not every one of them has a story like mine. And so it's pretty simple for me to understand, acknowledge, empathize with people who are going through many of the same things that I went through.
And I think that it's so powerful, especially what you're doing. So with Hope for Hardship, what are the situation, especially in America right now, when it comes to the housing market, the rental crisis, the inflation, LA fires, insurance, like even in the state of Florida, a lot of insurers pulled out. All of that's going on. A lot of people can't even afford to buy a home, much less keep the ones that they're in, right? For someone who is in a situation of foreclosure, what are the services that Hope for Hardship provides, and what are the first steps even that you even recommend someone doing in that situation?
Yeah, so the first step is the hardest one, and that is to believe that the very entity that is threatening you is the entity that can help you.
What, Mike?
Yeah,
Listen.
sure, right? And that's, people don't, and look, I get it. I have a special little piece of my heart I saved with hate in it for banks. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. If things aren't going right in your life, banks are not cool. There's nothing cool about a bank.
Fees and interest, honey.
Yeah, and so like but man, I'll tell you, they don't want to foreclose, and that is one inalienable truth in all of America, is that no bank in America wants to foreclose, and no homeowner in America wants to be foreclosed on. Those are absolutes. The bank doesn't want to own your house. And now it's it's an F around and find out situation. Yeah, don't do anything. They will own your house. You know what I mean? And just go ahead, just wait, and they will. They'll take it. It's not a home to the bank. It's collateral. It's collateral on a secured debt, no different than if you went out and bought a boat with a loan or bought a car with a loan. It is secured debt, and it is collateral in the eyes of the bank, and they will do what they must in order to protect their collateral, to retain a return on their investment of loaning you the money to buy the house. But they don't want to own it. Banks have a fear, and it really goes back to 08 and in the 80s and late 70s. It goes back to those times. Banks have gotten hip to the idea that they are deathly afraid that people who fall behind on their mortgage fall behind on repairs, maintenance, upkeep, and maybe even abandoning the collateral, i.e. the home. They are in fear of that. and they don't want that to happen. So they don't want to end up owning it and having it be just littered with deferred maintenance and a leaky roof and God knows what. And so they want to work with you. And so that's the first step that we take is we get on the phone with the bank, and we take our years of experience, and we do our level best to convince the bank that the borrower, the homeowner, is a viable bet in the future to resume normal payments. Now, the best scenario that we get for people, and it happens with almost every FHA or Freddie or Fannie backed government subsidized loan, and that is called a partial claim mortgage. And what that means is the bank will take the past due amount, the arrearage, and when everyone gets that statement, if they open them, because I went 2 years without opening mail, so I get it. But when you open up the statement and it's got on the top right-hand corner, it's got a huge number that might as well be 20 million, even if it's 20,000. And you know damn well as the homeowner that you can't come up with $20,000, and that is deflating and defeating. But that's the real issue standing between you and getting back in the good graces with the bank. And so all government-backed loans will allow you to take that arrearage, that past due, tack it onto a second mortgage on the back end of the loan at 0% with no payments due, and you don't have to deal with it until one of three things happen. You refinance the house, you sell the house, or the maturity date of your original note. Mm-hmm. Those are the best case scenarios, and the fair exchange that the bank asks for is, okay, we'll do that if you resume normal payments in about 60 days. Mm-hmm. The reason I love that one so much is it keeps intact the original note. And I will tell you that the vast majority of people that I talk to every day are sitting on mortgages with fixed, long-term, sub 3% rates. I cannot express in the spoken word
it's climate
how valuable that is in America today. It's possible that you and I go our entire lives without seeing 2.5% mortgages again.
I wish my mortgage was 2.5%. It's not what it is, what people are dealing with now. Even now, I'm like, oh.
And that's the value of it, right? That's it. The goal here with the vast majority of these people, because I'm telling you, most of the people I talk to are under 3% or 3.25% or something, 30 year fixed. Mm-hmm. The value of retaining those original terms and remaining a homeowner at that amazing rate is, it can't even be effectively spoken or written. It is unattainable today. And you touched on that with the environment and the economy today, the cost of housing. The affordability index is an index that they use, nationwide and state by state, and it's the lowest it's been since the late 70s, early 80s, which not coincidentally during that time, interest rates were in the double digits, inflation was sky high, and it was similar to this environment. And the affordability index is currently 48. Which means, if I can express that accurately, it means that the average American household earns 48% of the amount of money required to buy the average priced home. Just take that into consideration for a second. The average household earns less than half than is what is required to qualify for a mortgage to buy the average home in America. And that right there is the problem in this country right now. Housing is unaffordable. And rent, of course, rent is just as unaffordable. And so if I can help people, just be an advocate for home ownership. I don't want people to go from a homeowner to a tenant at sufferance is what it really is. Because if you're sitting in a 3 or a 4 bedroom home, that you paid $400,000 for in 2020, and your mortgage rate is 2.5%, to go find a rental with that same amount of money required for a payment every month, you're going to be in a 2 bedroom apartment with 1 bathroom, and you, your spouse, and a couple kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, you want to talk about humbling. That is, that's the very dictionary definition of going first class to coach. And that is challenging for anyone's psyche to cope with.
Mm-hmm.
Never mind with two young mouths around who need to be fed. And I mean, listen, this is a real situation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, listen, it doesn't discriminate. Okay, this problem does not discriminate in any fashion, not by age, by race, by religion, by anything. All right, I deal with elders all the time who are in this same sort of situation. I deal with young couples. I deal with single people. I deal with everybody on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so our main goal is to do that. And we do that by crafting outstanding applications for assistance, to lay out a plan for the bank that says these people are going to get back in your good graces. And that's really the reality. We understand they've fallen out of your good graces, but we are confident we can get back in your good graces. And that's the process. And I only touched on what the ideal situation is, but there are multiple retention options that a bank will offer a homeowner in order to retain their home and work with the bank. Multiple. They're across the spectrum. And we have a pretty solid understanding of all of them and what to expect. And so, look, a foreclosure is one of the worst things that can happen to you. It's one of the worst things. Foreclosure and bankruptcy are deemed public events, and they go on your credit and they stay there for 7 years. And once you have a foreclosure, it's hard to convince a landlord that you're a viable bet. It's hard to convince anyone that you're a viable bet. And so we do everything in our power to help them avoid foreclosure. That's the primary macro goal. And then there are a bunch of mini goals on the way up.
Mm-hmm. So you touched on a lot, and
Sorry.
all of that. No. I love it. I was just like absorbing everything.
Yep.
In situations now where people owned a home, so for example, the LA fires, people home got burnt up, and I don't know what the insurance industry is even going to look like, because at first I thought maybe this is going to affect LA. But what I've learned and understand about insurance is that's going to kind of touch all of us, because the insurers are going to raise the premiums to cover those losses. So we're thinking that, okay, if we're not in that immediate area, it doesn't necessarily happen that way. But that's how insurance really works. Like I remember, and this is with my car, 3 years ago, my car insurance went up. And I was like, why did it go up when I'm a great driver? I have no tickets, I have no nothing. And the lady explained to me, I live in an area that had a lot of accidents. So regardless of my good driving record, they raised the premiums to mitigate that loss, right? And I used to audit insurance companies.
Sure.
For those people now, even in a grand world where, you know, because you touched on it, it doesn't discriminate on age, race, wealth, status, all of that, right? And a lot of people had really magnificent heritage homes that were passed down generationally that had protections that they just won't have moving forward.
Right.
And probably did not, even if they are going to get payout, who knows, probably didn't have enough insurance to replace what would be the cost to rebuild in said areas. For those people now, what would be their options? And I'm sure if they had what you said, like a 2.5, 6%, they're not going to get that now.
No, they're not. You're absolutely right. They're not. And look, insurance companies are ecumenical abusers. Okay, for lack of a better
I need
term.
to write down that word, ecumenical.
Yeah. Ecumenical abusers, meaning they fade the losses. You know, they're not going to just absorb losses in one community. They're going to spread those losses across all of our lives. You know, I'm 3,300 miles away from these fires, and my insurance rates will be affected by them. So everyone's going to feel that pain. There's no question. You know, any company that offers a service like that is going to spread the wealth, spread the loss. But listen, in that area specifically, I think the first thing they need to do is they have to deregulate, right? Because historically in this country, I'm going to a town meeting tonight to try to get a variance on a property. And I've been going through this for 9
What's
months.
a variance on a property?
Well, the property does not fit the mold according to the zoning bylaws
Mm-hmm.
that allow for a 2-family dwelling to be constructed on it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 220 square feet short on
Mm-hmm.
acreage, but I'm requesting a variance to allow me to do it, and that's the term is you
Oh, okay.
need a variance away from the pre-existing zoning bylaws. So the
Okay.
problem you got in California is all those properties, not all of them, but most of those properties were built prior to the current zoning bylaws being in place. They
Mm-hmm.
were grandfathered because they didn't have to fit the box. Zoning bylaws are like a checklist. Is it 46,000 square feet? Does it have 100 feet of frontage? Are the exterior walls of the property are they 20 feet away from the property line? And so it has to fit a box. Each property does. And in order for these people to rebuild, the vast majority of them won't fit the bylaws as they are currently constituted because they've changed so much since the 80 years ago, 70 years ago when they were built. So I don't know. The first thing that California needs to do is soften those bylaws and say, look, whatever you had, build it again, right? And that's part of the problem here is these people are facing such a tragedy, right, on every level, that they don't need the town and city ordinances getting in the way of them rebuilding their home so they have a place to live. They need to just wipe that stuff off the board and open these people up so they can start building pretty much immediately. They are going to listen. There's no bank in America, in the world, that's going to make a special example and say, "Oh, you can have your 2% mortgage back." I highly doubt that's going to happen. And it's so I think the sad reality. I'm talking about what needs to happen. I don't have a lot of faith that it's going to happen, unfortunately. But unfortunately, what is happening is people are rent gouging.
Mm-hmm.
And
I figured that would happen.
Oh my
Like
God.
I figured there were articles, especially around pandemic times, of Target and different places knowingly kept things higher because they knew that they could.
Yeah.
Even though there was no, because at first it was like, oh, it's a supply chain issue and it's a this and a that. And then they just realized, oh, they can just charge this. So we're
It's
just
an
gonna keep it up.
age-old, the age-old rule of capitalism is the best way to maximize return is by leveraging demand.
Mm-hmm.
And that is exactly what's happening right now. Demand for housing has been leveraged by an act of God. And the human condition is real. Human beings, they come in all types, and there are a lot who will just capitalize on that fact. I know some real estate brokers in California who shared with me that overnight a property was in the MLS for $4,000 a month for rent, and overnight they jacked it to 7,500, 8,000.
I was gonna say 6,000, but oh my God, that's a lot.
It's the human condition. It's alive and well, and people will seek to capitalize, even if it's on the perceived misfortune of others, and that is the sad reality of human beings sometimes, and it's just the way it is.
I have a question. So, and I'm so glad I have you as an expert on here because I've been seeing this pop up on my timeline a lot.
That's cool. All right.
So there are two questions. I'll start with the first.
Okay.
Is a part of the housing crisis the fact that there's not a lot of new construction since like the 70s, 80s? Like there's been a sharp decline of like new builds. Is that contributing? Like the inventory is just low?
Yeah. So of course, new builds, new units being introduced to the community is a huge problem. Part of that problem, of course, the cost of materials is through the roof. The other part of that problem are all of the zoning bylaws and regulations in place that make it. I went to another meeting last night where there's a gentleman trying to do a 30-lot subdivision with I think 10 or 12% of the units being deemed affordable housing. And so he's doing something positive for the community by creating some affordable housing. And he has been going through this for 2.5 years. I was talking to him after 2.5 years. He's been trying to get permits to provide 30 new units to the community. And it's so that regulation, material costs is what is creating those kinds of problems. But yeah, in general terms, it's an inventory problem. That's our problem right now. There are more qualified buyers than there are available homes. And that leads directly to the ridiculously unreasonable pricing appreciation over the last 5 years. 43% increase in values of homes in 5 years. First and foremost, that isn't real. It's only real if you sell, right? But it's unsustainable long term. And the problem you got is that's how the prices got so jacked up, is that there were so many more. As soon as they dropped rates down into the twos in 2020, 2021, everyone became a buyer. It was much akin to what went on during the last boom of 04, 05, 06, when it wasn't the rates that were so attractive, but it was like, hey, can you fog this mirror? Okay, here's a mortgage, right? That's what we went through last time. You know, if you're alive, you get a mortgage. So when everyone's a buyer, prices go up because there are 20, 30 qualified buyers for each home, and they start bidding wars and they jack the prices up. And once a few properties sell for $50,000 more than ask,
that's the new market value.
Now you have comparables that created a new value. None of it's real. It's all BS. None of it's real. It's just, you know, it's capitalism is what it is. It's maximizing return by leveraging demand, and that's what people do. And it's not necessarily wrong, I guess. It's just reality. And so yeah, we have an inventory problem. We don't have enough housing for the people who need housing. And so what you have now is there's a whole bunch of people in golden handcuffs, right? Where they're sitting in a property that they don't actually want to be in anymore, whether they're having more children, their family's growing up, the parents are moving in, up, the kids are moving back, and they're kind of expanding the barriers of the home. They would sell and upgrade to another home, but they're sitting in a 2.25% mortgage fixed for 30 years, and their housing cost would quadruple, if not quintuple, in order to level up. And so it is, it's absolutely.
I know in my family's neighborhood, I saw a lot of houses just construct additions versus just selling their original house.
Right. Yeah.
That just construct. And I was wondering, why are people doing that? But I figured it's because it's just easier to get a construction loan for just a small piece, whatever that addition is, than to give up that 2.5% or whatever that was. Plus, they bought their house probably when it was worth $250,000, $300,000, and that same house is almost like $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 where that is now.
Sure. And that's one great thing that Massachusetts just passed last year. It's an ADU law, accessory dwelling unit, where they allow any single family home in Massachusetts to add a legal accessory dwelling unit. So you can move the parents in, you can do that kind of thing. Kids are staying home longer because kids can't afford real estate. 40%.
1 in 3 millennials, that's my generation. 1 in 3 millennials live at home with their parents.
Yeah, right.
And I was looking at Lennar, which is a popular developer down here. A lot of their new construction homes already come in with either additional dwelling units or like a subside for either an elderly parent to come in or a child. They're already incorporating like en suites in the new home designs with that in mind.
100%. And they should. It's almost like every home should have one. Every new build property should have an accessory dwelling unit. It would solve a lot of the problems. 40% of the deals we did last year, 40% of the real estate transactions we did, which is the highest number in my career, were cash. And so it's tough to compete. It's tough to compete in the world of real estate purchasing when you're competing against cash buyers. You know, cash is king. Sellers love cash buyers. They're less checklists, less check boxes to go through. But about 40% of that 40% were actually parents emptying their retirement to buy their child a home, cash, with the agreement that when rates come down, refinance me out and give me my money.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that sounds great, but we know how those agreements can go in life. And, I mean, anything could happen. And God forbid if values went down, they couldn't refinance. There are significant and get their parents all of their money back. So we're playing with fire in a whole bunch of different ways in this economy.
I wonder why they didn't choose to just get the home and just rent it out to them until it was time they could afford or to sell it back. Or because in the case that they couldn't afford it, then they could just have it as a rental property.
It's it wasn't so much about who owned it. Some of those people, the parents owned it, whatever, but it was more a function of, look, it's so expensive to get a mortgage today. We'll take our retirement, we'll buy you a home, and when the rates come down back to something reasonable, 4.5%, 5%, you guys can go get a loan. And it's also because of the competing that they're doing. People have gotten hip to the idea. You got these young couples, and young nowadays is like 30, really. It used to be 24, who are out there trying to buy homes on a regular basis, and their offers are not being accepted. They are using an FHA loan where they're much more stringent, and sellers and listing agents know that. So if you get an FHA offer on your home and you get a cash offer,
you're taking the cash.
You're taking the cash offer. And so after 6 months of these kids trying to go out there and do it, the parents are finally like, all right, you know what? We'll pay cash. And when the rates come down, you can give us our money back. We're seeing a lot of that. And it's, and I'm just kind of like, I observe all this stuff, and I can't help but think, oh man, that could be a problem.
Right.
That could be a problem, divorce, like if something happens with the kid, you know what I mean? And now all your retirement's tied up in this house. It's in dispute. Like there's a million different reasons why that's, but hey, people.
You don't say anything when those deals come across. Right? You just facilitate.
I just observe. I make a mental note. Walk into the next thing, but it's crazy. It is.
Exactly.
Yeah, housing affordability is directly related to inventory. Yes, we have an inventory problem in this company. We do not have in this country. We do not have enough homes to satisfy the need.
Okay. So, Mike, I'm going to share with you something that I do. So, I sometimes go down these YouTube rabbit holes, and the other day I went these apartment shorts and apartment videos, especially in places like New York and all these other places popped up, right? And that always blows my mind because I'm like, people paying $10,000 for like a hut, but whatever.
How much do you pay in rent? Can I tour your house? I know the guy.
Yeah. All kind of videos were popping up.
Yep.
But there was this thread about luxury apartments and how that is a scam. Because basically what luxury apartments is basically a new construction apartment. But they just say luxury because it has the new finishes, but there's like no door service, no whatever. Yeah. So they put luxury on the apartment to justify the jacked up price. And when I look in my area, thank God, listen, I got my place in 2018. Before some of the shenanigans, the same apartment I was renting before, I looked at the price. It's definitely like 50 to 70% more than my mortgage, right? Just to stay in that same apartment if I would have stayed. But I noticed in my area, where I live is perfect because it's like, I call it like the gentrification line. Like to the left is like the wealth of Palm Beach, like riches, like riches. Yeah. And then to the right is kind of like middle class, right? But like I knew that there was going to be a lot of development, and over the years there was a lot of homes, a lot of luxury this, luxury that being pulled. And I wonder if that is also contributing to the housing crisis. Because what I do notice more is more townhomes and a lot more apartments, but not a lot of single family homes being built.
Sure. Yeah. You're in Florida?
Yes, I am in
Look,
Florida.
yeah.
Before everyone moved here during the pandemic and all that stuff. Now, my
Yeah,
home value has increased significantly from it,
of
right?
course. Of
But
course.
I often, and I'm a millennial, right? But I also have a very high paying professional career compared to what, the average, whatever. So I realize that a lot of my peers are at home with their parents, or it's just a different financial situation altogether, right?
Yeah.
Even ones who were living together, they break up and they got to move back home, right? Because they
Yeah.
can't afford whatever on their own.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, do you think these luxury new construction built apartments are a scam? And do you think the focus is on apartments for financial purposes versus just building these single family homes?
Yeah, listen, look, it's capitalism, right? And if you're a developer in America, your job, frankly, and especially with some of these big institutional investors, publicly traded companies, where the job is to maximize return, whether you are in it for yourself and your family, or for yourself and partners, or to shareholders. Your literal responsibility, your fiduciary responsibility, is to maximize return. And the best way to maximize return is to go up, right? Takes a lot more land to build 60 single family homes than it does to build 60 luxury apartments, right? A
Mhm.
lot more land. And that all relates to back to regulations, to do
Mhm.
60 single family homes in any community, you probably need 75 to 100 acres of land. So there's less of that in less desirable. There's certainly not 100 acres of any waterfront land anywhere. So anywhere near the water, they're just going up, right? But it's harder to do. I mean, out in the Midwest, you see a lot of tract housing where they'll build 400 homes because they have the luxury of land. Here in Massachusetts, where we're like very colonized, and it's like the OG of development, and everything is, all the streets are the name of trees and things. It's We don't have the land, we don't have the space. We're very congested. Every house sits on top of each other, on top of each
Mhm.
other, and so it's regional. But yeah, of course, the cost of building, the cost of land, the delays of regulation, the cost of capital, which costs so much money. These entities, these developers have to borrow money at sometimes double-digit interest rates and wait 2 years to get the appropriate permitting. There's so many things that just make it such a slodge through the mud to get to an occupancy permit, and they pass that cost on to the consumer. They pass it on to the consumer. It's just the reality of it. They're not going to absorb it and take a loss by selling, calling these apartments
Mhm.
what perhaps are, which is just apartments.
Yeah,
If they
because
can,
I looked at the apartments, I'm like, okay, it's new.
yeah,
And that's a nice backsplash tile that you can get at Home Depot and a nice counter. But I'm like, what? There's
yeah,
no doorman, there's no valet trash service, there's
yeah,
no, parking, so the
yeah.
amenity. So it's just like they were breaking down like the scam of these luxury apartments,
Of
which is
course,
just basically
sure.
home apartments.
And look, it's totally true. Yes, there are very few luxury apartments in America. Very few. And none of us can afford them.
Mhm.
It's like, let's attract the masses, and it's all psyche
Yeah,
stuff.
because then I was
No.
like, if the issue is a lot of people need to be in apartments,
Yeah,
wouldn't
absolutely right.
in my mindset, I know, all right, so I know the bottom line as a business person, you want to maximize return, but at the same time are you building these apartments that are just going to sit there because people can afford them? That you're not building for a price point that people can afford. I think people would take less luxury
Happening.
if
Yeah,
the
that's
price was
happening.
right.
Sure, that's
Do I
happening.
really need that quartz with the, accent wall
Sure.
feature? Or
Yep.
do I just need like a decent place that is affordable rent while I'm sheltering out this mortgage crisis.
Yeah. And look, I mean, every developer goes into a project with an idea on a pro forma of what they're going to make per unit. Everyone goes into it like that. And the longer it takes, there can be escalating interest rates in the money they borrowed. So it can start costing them more money to hold.
Oh, they
If
probably
there are,
got a variable interest rate.
yeah, and so if there are comparable units nearby, and if it takes 2 years to do it, and you say, okay, we're going to make this much per unit, but then you start looking at the comps when you get closer to actual occupancy permits, and the
Mhm.
comps are higher, they just, and believe me, I've never met a developer that wants to give a deal on the way out, like on the first one.
Mhm.
The deals come in real estate on multi-dwelling developments on the end, never in the beginning.
Mhm.
They all shoot for the moon in the beginning, and I mean, I get it, but look, the best way to sell real estate for a fair profit quickly is to price it tremendously aggressive. And the sad
Mhm.
reality of this business, doing it for so long, is I can tell you that the vast majority of sellers of any kind, individual homeowners, institutional investors, developers, they don't believe that. They want to ask for the moon,
Right.
settle at the
Because
atmosphere.
your emotions and all of that get involved versus like, okay, this is what makes
Yeah.
sense to get this done in a timely fashion.
People live in fear that people are going to bid lower than ask price. So they
Mhm.
put this fictitious buffer zone in there. No, well, let's price it at 900,000 because we know people are going to take 50,000 off. No, that's not the way to do it. That's a flawed mindset. The way to sell property quickly and get the most amount of money is not price it at the moon and settle at the atmosphere. It's price it at the atmosphere and get as close to the moon as you can.
Mhm.
And I spent the vast majority of my life working very hard to convince people of that reality. And any career real estate professional is doing the same.
Mm. Mhm. Because they know for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Ah,
it's been proven so many times.
okay, so this is going to go into the realm, but it's related to real estate. It's related to that. In the realm
Okay.
of relationships.
Mm,
The realm of relationships.
okay.
Do you think that, looking at previous years, like the 50s, 40s, 60s even, there were a lot more marriages, a lot more relationships of people coming together. With the decline of marriage and the decline of and more single people in this country, is that contributing also for us not being able to afford
Oh,
housing?
sure.
And do you think that the economics around housing and just the country right now is going to encourage people to like get over whatever it is and come back to trying to work relationships out just so we can survive together?
I'm not sure housing's that powerful. You know what I mean? I'm not sure it's that powerful. But I can tell you that we are a far cry from the 50s when there was one working spouse, two cars in the driveway. Those days are gone in this country. And it's sad, frankly. It's sad that life used to be that affordable in America, where one spouse, it's the stereotypical housewife, man goes to work, they afford two cars and a household, and only one person is working,
And
right?
kids, multiple
Yeah,
kids.
right, right. Like, dude, that it's honestly, I think it's a tragedy that that's not still available. I mean, whatever, if it's the woman working or the man work, whatever, but to be able to have a one person income and to be able to afford the average home in America should be reasonable in this country. And I have great hope that it will get there again in this country. But right now, it requires two very strong incomes, very fiscally responsible income earners in order to afford the average home in America. And so, yeah,
Mhm.
what you're talking about, a lot more single people, less marriage, marrying later, having kids later, all that stuff um, is reflective in that 48 affordability index. 48, only 48% of households earn 48% of what it requires to buy the average home, and that Yeah, so I don't think that nothing's going to solve that. I think that there are a lot of government programs that make it easier for people, not to get together, and assistance programs and stuff. And so, I think a lot of people become dependent on the system, and rather than a spouse or a partner or whatever. And I don't know that
Hmm.
none of us are going to solve that individually. I think it takes a collective mindset, and there's all sorts of next level, far above my and your pay grades, issues with the human psyche and today's generations that are going to solve, going back to the 50s. I don't think that's going to happen. Think, I think that it'd be nice if one person could work and afford a home. Whether they're with another person or not, I think that would be absolutely fantastic. And it wasn't that long ago; it was somewhat reasonable. You know,
Hmm.
but it certainly isn't now. It's 7% interest rates. Property values the highest they've been ever.
Hmm.
It's frankly just unaffordable to buy a home right now, and we're seeing it volume wise. The real estate sales volume last year is down 30%,
Hmm.
and that's reflective of people settling for a lesser housing situation than they truly want, whether that's living with friends, family, longer.
Roommates, all
Yeah,
kind of. I was
yeah,
like, it's a luxury just to be able to live alone. Like
of
just
course it
to,
is. It's a massive luxury. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely right. There are a lot of divorces happening, and those people that we work with, they are struggling for both. They're in a big, beautiful house. They've
Hmm.
owned it for 30 years,
Hmm.
and the humility that it requires to leave that and go figure out something on your own, and
Hmm.
the
Downsize.
the downgrade in housing situation from what
Hmm.
you have grown accustomed and or entitled to
Hmm.
is significant. And frankly, I think that's keeping a lot of marriages together. you know they're just living in separate
I
homes.
agree. So
There's no
I agree. So
question. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
and I know some wives.
Yes, right, sure. And whether it's, wives, husbands, whatever, it just doesn't. And you know what it does? It actually, it forces people. And look, there's some people who are just like that and will stay dependent on another human being their entire life and be perfectly comfortable with it. But there are people who don't actually have that in their makeup, but they become that,
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and that's horrible.
Yeah,
That's horrible
it's
because they
always
don't
better to
want.
have
Yeah,
options. Yeah.
yeah, they don't want to be that. But the reality of the economy right now. Yeah, I think so.
Mhm.
It's tough. It's tough
Well,
going out there. There's no question.
oh, and thank you for answering that.
Yeah,
Because
sure.
that's a reality of situations as well. And I know you see a lot of that as far as like deals I probably come across. But you have shared so much. I just feel so grateful to have you on here. It's such a
Absolutely.
delightful conversation. Please tell what are your final thoughts for today and let the audience know where they can find you,
Yeah, sure.
what you're up to, and how they can connect.
Yeah, my final thoughts are my everyday thoughts. If you are a homeowner, protect that at all costs. Um, don't take the easy way out. File bankruptcy to protect yourself. Seek all your options first. We would be honored to help you. The name of our nonprofit is Hope for Hardship. It's Hope, the number 4, Hardship. You can go to our site, hopeforhardship.org, or you can call me directly, 508-501-9214. And all you got to do is tell me a story. You call me up, you tell me your story, and I'll tell you the different ways to remedy your story.
Yeah. This is Mike's website, by the way, Hope for Hardship. You can go to hopeforhardship.org and find out services and how to contact his organization and how they can help you protect your home, like Mike is saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And we never look for money. This is truly paying it forward. It's a nonprofit for a reason. We're not looking we're not looking to, capitalize on anybody's misfortune. We're just looking to help people make better decisions than I did and have a softer landing spot than I created for myself. This podcast, we'll put it up there when it's ready. We'll throw it on the site. So
I appreciate that. And I thank you so much for everything that you have done and shared with us. We covered the gamut as far as
absolutely. Sure.
real estate, but also what's happening right now. I think people need this information for sure.
Well, as things change and time progresses, I'll be happy to come back anytime. So it's good to hook up. And
oh my God, thank you so much. I will definitely seek you out because I feel like 2025 is going to be a ride, especially with this housing situation.
Absolutely.
We might need you for some updates.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything's always changing, hopefully for the better.
All right. And thank you guys so much for listening to the WeWealthWoman podcast. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. The WeWealthWoman podcast is available on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon Audible, and a host of other places as well. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you are listening and watching this, and we will see you in the next one.